There we go. So we can circulate it to people who maybe couldn't have made today's meeting. Okay.
Jeremy, will the recording be available afterwards?
Yes. So if you're signed up to our e-bulletins, it's going to be circulated on there. Yeah. But if you want it any earlier, because the e-bulletins go out, I think at various points in the month. If you want it earlier, I can just email me and I can send it over to you.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So today we're going to review the key information about Southwark Council's Culture Together grant, and we're going to go through the application process as it would roughly look on their portal, their application portal, which is called Benefactor Cloud. Okay, and we're going to also understand how to approach the written questions in the application. Many of you, I'm sure, have done funding applications before. There's usually a couple of questions. They're the scoring questions, so what you're actually marked on, and they require a bit more detail. It feels like you have to get your kind of undergraduate hat on, you know, and write a little bit more of an essay. But again, as was highlighted earlier, just before the meeting began, it is good to be succinct as well and not add all the detail in, just the relevant information. Okay. So what is the key information about the grant? Of course, the Culture Together grant is there to fund projects that are in the culture and arts space. There are two sizes of grant available. So there's a small grants pot, and that's where you're applying for between £5,000 and £10,000. And there is a big grants pot, and that's from £10,001 through to £25,000. Okay, you can apply for funding for activities.
Sorry, Jeremy, we cannot hear you now.
Can others not hear me?
Yes, we can. I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Maybe just have a look at your computer settings. I think sometimes it connects to Bluetooth or something like that. Okay, so for activities taking place between the 1st of April 2026 and the 31st of March 2027, that's really important. If your project falls outside of those dates, they won't be funding you. There is an eligibility criteria, and that's a section on their application process, and that's to screen out projects that aren't relevant to this grant. Okay. Also, you have to be an arts or culture organisation registered to a Southwark postcode. It's worth noting that there is typically a better success rate for smaller grants. Okay, whereas for larger grants, there's about a 16% success rate. This shouldn't put you off applying for large.
Did you say 16 or 60?
16, yes. Sorry, 16, 16. Okay, this shouldn't put you off applying for larger grants if your project requires that higher level of funding. I went to a in-person session about this grant. The one thing that they don't want is people who clearly need more money applying for the smaller grant just because it might be more convenient or slightly easier, or if it's like the path of least resistance to get some money in the pot. So do apply for the grant that's appropriate to your project, but it's worth bearing in mind that you do have a better chance of success on those smaller grants. The larger grants will be paid across 3 installments, and the smaller grants across 2. I see Comfort's hand is up. I'm just going to run through the essential information, and then we'll have a break for questions. So just keep hold of your questions for now. Okay, of course, the grant cannot be used for making a profit, and at least 50% of your beneficiaries must live, work, or study in Southwark. And this fund aims to help Southwark's arts and culture organisation to build a culture sector that is more inclusive, sustainable, and equitable. Okay, so this ties in to the Southwark Stands Together initiative. That was an initiative that Southwark Council formed in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, and it is about inclusivity and equity, as well as just simply funding the arts and culture sector. There is also some questions in the application about climate. So if you can demonstrate that you monitor your carbon footprint, that can also be helpful, particularly for those larger grants as well. This grant is for a sequence of events or workshops or training, not one-off events, okay? So if it's just a single performance or a big Christmas do, that's not gonna, you're not gonna be successful on that basis. They wanna see a program of some kind, okay? An ongoing sequence of events. The documents that you'll want to have ready include a safeguarding policy if you work with young people and/or vulnerable adults. Of course, you need your governance documents, and they should have a Southwark postcode on them, as well as a recent bank statement for your organisation. So make sure that you have the relevant paperwork in position. But in this table here, this is a very relevant table. So this is census data, and this is on the Culture Together sort of information web page. You can see here that it has a demographic breakdown based on percentages of people in the borough. Okay, so these are benchmarks, okay, and I'll come on to the relevance of these shortly. So there are two types of application that they are looking to fund. One is change making and another is amplifying. And I'll explain what those words mean in a second. But the underlying idea is that your activity should aim to improve access to opportunities for groups marginalized by race, disability, sexual orientation, or gender or sex. Okay, so just going back to that previous table, that's why this table is here. Now, for change-making activities, you should apply for this if your work is, if your work in a given focus area is not yet broadly representative of the borough's population with respect to race, disability, sexual orientation, gender, or sex. Okay, and that could be with regards to the audience that your work is for. It could be about the diversity of your workforce. It could be about governance. So for example, your trustee board, or perhaps your artistic content. Who are you reaching and whose experiences are you representing through your work? Okay, so change making is about making meaningful change towards better inclusion, representation, equity for one or more of the groups above. So that's race, disability, sexual orientation, gender, or sex. When you fill out the application, there are more specific population groups. So it wouldn't just be about, I don't know, sexual orientation. It might break it down into more specific categories as well. And I think there is distinctions made between working age population as well and older groups and younger groups too. Organizations should apply for it on the basis that they are amplifying if you actually do broadly represent one of these given groups. Okay, so let's say, to go back, let's say your work is targeted towards people from a Black, Asian, and minority ethnic background, and you routinely reach 49% or more of that group. In that case, on the basis that you're continuing to cater to that population group, your work will be amplifying. And that means you want to celebrate, extend, or deepen your existing connection with one of those groups. So it's an important distinction to make, and to demonstrate whether you're change making or amplifying, you're going to want to have some data available, okay, to see if you can work out a kind of demographic breakdown of your recent beneficiaries and those that you're looking to target with your projects. Okay, so if you can get data on that, if you have that data, great. If you don't, the deadline is on the 23rd of November. Perhaps you can send out a very short survey with asking willing recent beneficiaries about, you know, their ethnicity, for example, or their disability status, or whatever it may be. Sorry. If you do that, of course, assure your recent beneficiaries that that their data will be anonymized for the purposes of sharing for an application form. And also always highlight any data privacy policy that you have in place. So as mentioned before, your project should support Southwark Stands Together. That's the Southwark Council's Inclusion, Diversity and Equity initiative, and it should celebrate or make meaningful change towards equality, inclusion, or representation in one of the following areas. So that's your audience, your workforce, governance, or artistic content. So audience, you're looking to reach a more representative group of people in Southwark. Your workforce, it might be a project that's there to diversify your staff or your volunteers. Governance, it might be there to diversify your board of trustees. Artistic content, you're producing, say, a film or a theatre performance that maybe represents or highlights certain experiences of one of those demographic groups. Also encourage activities that engage young people, address climate change as well, particularly on the larger grants. They want to see that you are taking bold steps to monitor your carbon footprint, as well as a focus on health and well-being. What they won't fund is capital costs. So they're not going to fund you to, fix a leaky roof, unfortunately, or something along those lines. What they can do, though, is if you need to hire a venue, they can cover that cost. They're not going to fund activities already supported by the Cultural Celebrations Fund or Neighbourhoods Grants. And please note that all activities must pay anyone in a relevant employee role at least a London living wage. So that's £14.80 an hour. So yes, if you're, hiring someone as a guest speaker, for example, you need to make sure that their payment is in line with that. The application deadline is on Sunday, 23rd of November, just on the cusp of midnight. Okay, so that gives you, I think, just over 2 weeks to get this application in order. The council will aim to respond by, I think, the middle of February is what they said, and they can offer feedback on your application as well. So that's the key information. There is a second half to this workshop. But I just want to take any questions now. So someone, Marcia, in the comment box has shared some of the data with the percentage breakdowns of various different population groups. Thank you for doing that. Comfort, you had your hand up earlier. Do you have a question still, or has it been addressed in that first part of the workshop? Or does anyone else have any questions for the time being, or does everything make sense so far? To use the raise hand feature.
Sorry, I've got a question.
Mm-hmm.
I run a CIC organisation that runs events in Peckham, but we're not registered in Peckham because we don't have an office. We're like a bit nomadic. Does that mean we're not allowed to apply to this funding?
Do you have governance documents?
Yeah, but they're all under my home address, which isn't in Southwark.
Isn't in Southwark. That might be that might be tricky, to be honest. My recommendation, based on the information that I've read, both at an information session on this grant and online, I think it's probably unlikely that you'd be able to be eligible for this grant. However, it's always worth asking the question to the funder themselves. So email culture@southwark.gov.uk. Okay, and just run it by them. They might unfortunately say no, but they might say, look, we understand where you're coming from. It's clear that you're catering to lots of people in Southwark, so we'll put an asterisk on your application, and we'll know that that one is actually, it's fair enough that you are considered for this grant.
Do you mind repeating that email address? Sorry, it's culture.
Yeah, culture@Southwark. I'll pop it in the chat.
Yeah, I think so. Put it in the chat because it's not
There we go. So Fred asks, where do we get the application from? I'll show you that in just a moment. Does anyone else have any questions before we move on with the rest of the workshop?
Hi, Jeremy. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the question was about the where we find forms, because sometimes we are put on kind of redundant links. They tell you go to this link, you look around and look around. There's no link for the forms. There's no direct phone to call. So we want to also to be sure, since we have a limited time, we have roughly only 2 weeks.
Yep. So I'll show you. I'll show you in literally the next slide. There's a specific web page that leads to what they call their portal, which is just a type of website where you can select the relevant grant to you and then run through the application. But it is all online. Yeah. Janabi Ma asks, with regards to address, would it help another organization to connect with another organization and use their address? It could be a solution. I think I'm not aware of them funding projects where there's 2 organizations attached to it. But again, it is worth asking that question by emailing the email I just shared in the account. I'm not too sure on that, unfortunately. It could help. I just wouldn't want to say with certainty that it definitely will help, and then you do a full application and then they turn you down on the basis of the eligibility criteria. So it is just worth asking that question. Unfortunately, I don't have the inside knowledge. I just have what I've absorbed from information sessions and other research, because it isn't my grant. It's just one that we're supporting members with. So I have tried to research it as thoroughly as possible, but there are all sorts of scenarios that aren't quite covered by the available information. And for that, you want to reach out to the individuals in the council who are administrating this. Okay, does anyone else have any questions before we move on? No. Okay, so application process. You want to register on Southwark Council's grant management portal. It's called Benefactor Cloud. I've gone through it myself. It's fairly user-friendly, I think, for the most part. Registering only takes a short time, okay? So when you register, you require an email address and you must select a password. Some of you may have used this portal before, so you may have a user account already. If possible, I would recommend using a generic email address. So that's one that's like info at your organization names, So for Community Southwark, our generic email address is info@communitysouthwark.org. Okay. And the reason for that is that if for whatever reason you need to change your email address on your user profile, that can take a few days to be approved. It's a relatively slow process, apparently. So a generic email is less likely to be changed. Whereas if you have an individual email address and someone leaves your organization and that email address is no longer being monitored, the inbox is no longer being monitored, then that might create issues. Okay, so if possible, use a generic email address. However, if you're confident that you're going to be you're going to be involved with your organization for a long time, it won't be a problem using your regular email address either, your individual email address. So when you register on the grant management portal, the Benefactor Cloud, it leads to a series of grants that they have available, okay? And sorry, it's a slightly small image, but there are 2 grants. Obviously, there's the small grants and the large grants. I've highlighted them on the screenshot of the web page. Okay, they have other grants there. They might be worth checking out as well. They might be of interest to you. But the 2 that are relevant to this training are the small grants and the large grants. So you have to select one or the other. Okay, and then it leads you to 2 different application sort of portals. But the information that they ask is pretty much the same. So once you've selected your application, so your small grants or your large grants, it leads you to the eligibility screening questions. So each of these questions really just reflects some of the information that I've just talked about. There's one that's, are you an arts or cultural organisation based in Southwark? Will your project focus on change making or amplifying? Will your activity take place between the 1st of April 26 and the 31st of March 27? Is your activity ongoing, so a sequence of events rather than a one-off event? Is your activity not-for-profit? Can you demonstrate that at least 50% of your participants or beneficiaries will be Southwark residents? Are you working with young people and or vulnerable groups? So that's about the safeguarding policy that you need to have in place for that. Do you have an active UK bank account in the name of your organisation? And can you provide governance documents? So it's all that information that we've just talked about. And really this eligibility criteria section is there to not waste your time. If you're not eligible, there's no point, drafting out written responses for the rest of it. It won't be in your interest to do that, and it won't be in the council's interest to read it if you don't qualify for the grant from the beginning. Okay, but none of these questions really address like the substance of your project. That comes next.
Could you please put in the link where you say we have to register, so to double check if we are registered there or not? Because sometimes you think there are a lot of places we have registered under Southwark Council, so you can never know which one.
Sorry, put the link to the portal.
Both the link and the photo, because so that we can double check, there's just 2 weeks.
I'll send an email after today's session with the slides and with the link to the Benefactor Cloud portal, and from there you can check if that's okay. Check if you've already got an account or whatever it is. Janabi Ma asks, does the art and culture element need to be part of your constitution? I think there is I think as long as you can make a case for your work being relevant in the areas of arts and culture, I think you'll be okay. I don't necessarily think you need to be specifically a performing arts organization or specifically an organization about film or whatever. It's more about the project, okay? They will want to see that there is a project there that makes sense with your overall mission, that you're not just simply taking on, an extra project that seems very distinct from your day-to-day work. But I think for the most part, there is a cultural dimension to most work done by voluntary and community groups. Okay.
I remember last year, sorry, last year I think you did say that it had to be in the Constitution or the Articles of Association. So is there any change on that then, or it's just?
Let me look it up. It might have been a different grant last year, because I think this is the first time I've done culture together.
Okay, thank you.
But let me look that up.
Thank you.
Okay. But for everything I've heard, it's very much about the projects. It's very much about the project as opposed to the broader work that you might do. Okay. Okay, so that's the eligibility, and then it leads to the application form. Okay, so you'll see this information page. There's not a whole lot to note on this that I haven't mentioned already, with the exception of an offer. Have a meeting with one of the Culture Together team, and that's if you have any questions or issues. So to do that, email that email address that I just shared in the chat, culture@southwark.gov.uk. I would look to do that sooner rather than later. The closer to the deadline, the less capacity they may have, and they may tell you, sorry, we just don't have the personnel right now to have that meeting. If you get it in early, well, you can always cancel it, but at least you know that you can have that meeting with them to address any of the details that you may be uncertain about. Okay, but that yeah, the first page is just an information page. It also highlights the deadline as well. From there, it goes into your details. So that's your address, that's your organization phone number, your organization email address, the year that your organization was established. Everything with the red star next to it is essential. You've got to fill that out, and do fill it out for your organization as well. In some cases, your details might be the same as your personal details. For example, if your organization works out of your accommodation, you don't have an external building, then it's obviously fair enough to put your own address there. But just make sure everything matches up with your governance documents as well. They'll be cross-referencing to your governance documents. Okay, so that's fairly basic. And then from there, we get to the more substantive application questions. So apologies if this is a little bit small on the screen, but I will be going through it. I'll speak through each one. Each section of the application has a letter and a number. So it goes to B1, B2, B3, etc. B1 asks which ward your organization is located in. So it could be Faraday, for example. And then B2 asks for your project name and how much you are applying for. Also, your project start and end date. So remember, your project start and end date must fall between the 1st of April 26 and the 31st of March 27. B3 asks which of the following population groups will most benefit from your activity, and there is a list to choose from. Each group is related to the demographic groups in that table I shared earlier. Okay. There's also an option of selecting a second group too, if you're looking to reach more than one group. So remember, your project will either be change making or amplifying. If it's change making, this might mean, for example, just 20% of your total beneficiaries are from a Black, Asian, or minority ethnic background, and you're looking to increase that number, and that would help your project get closer to that figure of 49% or more, and therefore your work becomes more representative of Southwark's different population groups. If your project is amplifying, using that same example, maybe you're already reaching 55% of the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities, and you're celebrating, embedding, or deepening that existing connection. Perhaps you're creating a film that celebrates you know, experiences shared by people in that group. Okay. I'll just have a look at a couple of questions now. One is, would a long-term active Latin American community group with a bank account registered with an address in Southwark with governance, but you're not yet registered as a voluntary organization or CIC? As far as I'm aware, there isn't a stipulation that groups have to be formally. Let me just check. Sorry. So it would depend on the nature of your governance documents, I think. So you would have to run that by them just to see if the governance documents would fit the bill. As far as I'm aware, there isn't a specific criteria as to whether it needs to be a registered charity or a CIO or a CIC. Some grants do say it needs to be a registered charity, or it needs to be this, or it needs to be that. I think this grant does allow more informal groups as well, but I would reach out to culture@southwark.gov.uk just to confirm that. Okay, Marcia, you've got your hand up. Do you want to speak?
Jeremy, that was the question. And Vilmita, can you speak?
Yeah, sorry. I said it depends on the nature of your governance documents. So what kind of governance documents do you have in place?
Vilmita, what governments do you have in place?
Yeah, governance.
I speak on behalf of someone I'm supporting in the process of applying.
Hello.
Gracias.
Yeah, sorry. I asked.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, can we just turn our microphones off if we're not speaking.
Jeremy, I have invited Vilmita to be able to explain because I was speaking on her behalf.
Oh, I
but she
see.
knows
So,
the government's documents. Please.
oh, sorry.
Gracias. Thank you. Vilmita,
Morning,
please, please
yes,
ask.
go on. Go on. My government documented by constitution, by guarantee, but they don't register that my organization just for a community groups. Is eligibility.
How many years have you been operating, please?
Operating more than 15 voluntaries in my organization.
How many years?
Oh, for 9 years.
I think you'd be fine, to be honest. If you've got that governance document in place, I've not seen any condition that says we only fund organizations, you know, that are formally constituted in that legal sense. If you've got governance documents, I would maybe send an email to council, the culture at southwark.gov, just to make sure. But I think you'd be fine, especially given the track record that you have of delivering services in Southwark over a very long period of time. I'd be very surprised if you weren't eligible. Okay, it is worth just checking in beforehand, I would say, before you get on the application, just to make doubly sure. But I'm pretty sure you'd be okay.
Thank you. We'll do that. Thank you. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, yeah, just to continue on now. Yeah, we just mentioned about whether you're organized, about the different population groups that you're looking to serve through your work, that you're looking to reach in some way, and that you could be reaching them through the audience that receives your work. It could be about diversifying your trustee board or your workforce, your volunteer group, or it could be about creating art that reflects certain cultural experiences, okay? And you do have the option of selecting a second population group as well. That leads us to B4, and that asks about your focus area. So that has another drop-down box with the following options. So that is artistic content, governance, workforce, or audience, okay? So B3 is about which population group you're trying to reach. B4 is about how you're reaching them, okay? Is it about diversifying your workforce? Is it about what you're producing through your project in terms of artistic content? Is it about the audience, the trustee board, or what have you? Okay, and again, with your focus area, that also comes with the option of selecting a second focus area if your project is trying to do different things simultaneously. There is also a follow-up question that says, would you describe your existing work in this focus area as representative of the local population demographic? Okay, would you describe your existing work in this focus area as representative of the local population demographic? So for change-making applications, it would be expected that your existing work is lower than the benchmarks in the table. Okay, so, you know, if you're looking to reach transgender and non-binary people and you don't have yet you've not reached very many of them, maybe it would only be 0.5% of your overall audience would be transgender or non-binary versus the benchmark in the table that is 1.2%. Okay, but amplifying applications, it would be expected that your the percentage in your current set of beneficiaries would be equal to or higher than the percentage in that table on the application form. It then asks for that percentage figure. Okay, so ideally you will have demographic data on recent beneficiaries for your services, which can be used to calculate what percentage of your total beneficiaries are from the group you are targeting your support. Okay, if you don't have that data, it would be worth sending out a very short survey to recent beneficiaries to work out this figure. Okay, so the next question is then, please tell us why there is a need for your activity in relation to your chosen beneficiary group and focus area. So this is your first proper written response. Okay, this is about identifying a need for your project, highlighting what issue exists that you're trying to cater to. And to answer this question effectively, it's worth using statistics from research, perhaps combined with 1 or 2 quotes from Southwark residents that you've collected recently. And that can help build a really compelling case for why your activities are needed for your selected population group. Okay, when it comes to data sources, one really good one is the Southwark Council's JSNA report. There's a lot of interesting statistics in that report, but you can also go to the census data, London Data Store, or perhaps there's an alternative data source as well. Maybe you've seen something, I don't know, from a university or the government, or maybe a think tank as well. There's also research conducted by charities. You know, there's plenty available. You may have also done some research yourself as well. I think it's fair enough to cite in-house research, but you may also want to back it up with some statistics that come from one of these very established bodies like the council, like the census. So find a meaningful statistic that really highlights a need for your project. It might be something like, you know, I don't know, I'm just making this up, but 75% of Latin American residents in Southwark feel excluded from cultural activities, you know, that the council has delivered in the last 5 years, something like that. I'm just making that up, but there may be some statistics out there that really get to the heart of why your project is needed. And from there, it can also help to combine those statistics with quotes, you know, testimonies from people where you can put across the human case. Okay, it's good to having a statistic to have that base of facts, but a quote can actually create a compelling narrative. You know, it can capture the more emotional dimension of what is lost by not having an arts and culture sector that represents all of our experiences. Okay, so to collect those quotes, again, you may have some from just what people have said after a previous event you've done. Maybe you've run surveys in the past. Maybe you can conduct a short interview. And remember, interviews don't have to be a lengthy, pre-organized events. It's not necessarily like a journalistic thing. It might just be a simple voice recording at the end of a coffee morning, you know? You can also do focus groups as well. Okay, so a survey allows you to capture a lot of information quickly, which can be really helpful, but interviews can sometimes be a bit quicker. You know, and focus groups can help stimulate conversation as well. And maybe that can get to the heart of why people feel frustrated at the lack of representation in arts and culture in the borough. One thing to note is that when referencing data or when using quotes, don't overdo it. You don't have to pack in every single statistic that's vaguely relevant to your work. Pick the most meaningful ones, the ones that really best highlight the need for your project in relation to your chosen population group. That's the first written response, and you'll be scored on that question. Okay, so it's worth thinking about that one a little bit, doing a little bit of research, creating maybe a bank of a small bank of quotes and statistics. Maybe you have some kicking around from recent funding applications you've done as well. And then there is more to this project details section. Okay, so moving on. B5 asks, as mentioned, will you be change making or amplifying? And that's just a simple drop-down box to select from. And then B6 is about your activity focus. Okay, what creative practice is at the heart of your project? Is it dance, theatre, music? There is also a other option, and you can select that and write in your area, your activity focus there. Okay, so maybe that drop-down box doesn't cover something that you do. Maybe what you do is more niche, or it takes maybe a little bit more explaining, and you are able to still submit that information in this form. B7 is about your activities. Okay, again, this is one of the scoring questions, and it says, please tell us about what you want to do. So that is what you will deliver, who will deliver it, when and where, and who will benefit. So this is another longer written response. My advice is be very specific on each of those points. So what will you deliver, who will deliver it, when and where, and who will benefit. You know, if you can have some numbers ready to say that we expect to reach 10 to 15 individuals from this or that community at each, I don't know, theatre workshop we're delivering, and we'll deliver it twice weekly. You know, those kind of that level of specificity can be really helpful. What tends to not go down so well is when it's vague and you talk about, I don't know, for example, we provide holistic support to, you know, a diverse group of people. You know, that may be true and that's great, but it lacks that detail. You know, there's plenty of ways that you could interpret what that activity could be. You know, holistic support, diverse group of people, great, but what does the actual activity look like, and how often will it happen, and who will benefit from it? You know, that's more specific information that builds a picture in the grant funder's mind. Okay. You don't need to go into huge amounts of detail. I don't think you necessarily need to build in tons of quotes and testimonies and things like that. Just be incredibly specific on those points. You can think of it a little bit like that, you know, from school, it was who, what, when, where, why. If you can sort of cover those bases, you're on the right path. Okay, so that's another important question, B7. Okay, because that's a scoring question. You'll be marked on that one. B8 asks, how will you promote your activities? So what do you do already to promote your activities? Do you have WhatsApp groups? Do you use social media like Instagram? Do you give out flyers on the street? Do you do outreach sessions at community centres? There isn't a right answer to this question. It's whatever's been working for you. I would just say, you know, just be open and detailed about what it is. If it's a WhatsApp group, maybe mention also that you have a WhatsApp group and there's 75 people there, and that's part of a regular cohort of individuals that you reach through your services, you know. But again, there's not a right answer. Different groups need to promote their activities in different ways, you know. B9 asks for the postcodes for where your activities will be delivered. So you have a postcode for your organization, hopefully, and that'll be on your governance documents. But if you're not always delivering your services from that postcode, will you be reaching out to a postcode in Peckham? Will you be reaching out to a postcode in Bermondsey, Dulwich? Where will it be? So again, I think there's 6 postcodes that you can enter there. So that sort of suggests that you may be delivering services widely, but maybe you actually typically do everything from one community centre in one postcode, and then you can just enter one postcode and that's fine. B10 asks about beneficiaries. So this is how many beneficiaries you expect to reach that are from Southwark. Okay, so B10 is how many beneficiaries from Southwark. It's worth remembering that this grant does not favour projects that are bigger. Okay, the scoring criteria won't favour a dance class of 200 compared to 20. They understand that sometimes smaller groups, you get deeper benefits from that because you build up a deeper connection with those individuals. So they are more just curious about how many Southwark residents you expect to reach. And then it also asks for your total number of beneficiaries. So this is to work out that 50% or more of your beneficiaries are indeed from Southwark. Okay. So yeah, that's important, just to make sure that, you know, if you've got 100 total beneficiaries and you put down 20 of those are going to be from Southwark, your application may fail on that basis because you're not hitting that 50% threshold that is required. Okay, and then the question asks, please describe who will benefit from the funded activity. offering as much detail as possible about your target beneficiaries. Okay, so that's talking about your audiences, your participants, your artists that you may work with, visitors. So think not only about who your beneficiaries are, but also who you might collaborate with. You can also think about, you know, is your audience typically a younger group? You know, are your beneficiaries typically younger? Are they older? You know, it's time to that. This is an opportunity to add a little bit more detail, a little bit more context about who you're working with and who you're delivering services for. I think underlying that, there's an acknowledgement that the population groups that were in that drop-down box is quite a sort of blunt way of sort of suggesting the demographic. There's within each of those groups, there is a lot more diversity than just that, you know. You know, we don't want to just reduce, I don't know, disabled people down to a disabled category, right? You know, you might also want to talk about specific kinds of disabilities that may affect people, and, you know, different types of people that you collaborate with on the project as well. So it's an opportunity to add that extra detail about who you're working with and who will participate in the project. It then asks, please outline your approach to collecting demographic information on your target beneficiaries / population groups. Okay, this is an important question. What data do you collect about your service users and how do you collect it? Perhaps it's through feedback forms or registration forms. Maybe, I mean, there's only a couple of weeks to go for the application. Maybe this is the opportunity now to put that system in place. If you don't yet collect that information and you need to collect that information for this grant, maybe send a form out and then you can discuss the fact that you put a form together and you send it out to your service users and you ask for XYZ information. Okay. So yeah, they want to see a certain level of, they want to see that you have robust data collection processes in your organization. That's how they can be confident that you are indeed reaching the population group that you'll say you're reaching. You know, because anyone can just say, oh, we think we're going to be reaching this group or that group, you know, but they want to show, they want to know, well, they can say that, but how are they actually doing that? And can they assure people that they really will be reaching that group? You know, will it be reflected in that data? Moving on, B11 and B12 are about climate commitments and monitoring your carbon footprint. Okay, this is particularly important to those bigger grants, and it's to demonstrate that you align with the council's strategy on addressing climate change. It is less important for the smaller grants in terms of the scoring criteria, but it's still good to show. It also references this website called Julie's Bicycle. I don't know if anyone's heard of Julie's Bicycle, but that's a free carbon calculator that you can use to monitor your impact on the climate. Okay. It's also worth reminding ourselves that Southwark Council's climate strategic priorities focus on 5 areas: buildings and energy, streets and transport, natural environment, greener economy, and people and resources. Okay, and the key goals include to reach net zero emissions by 2030. If you can demonstrate that you're in alignment with their climate strategy, that's really helpful, particularly for those larger grants. Okay, and if you're not familiar with things like Julie's Bicycle, maybe now's the opportunity to get familiar with it, because it can be a useful tool if you're looking to bring down your carbon emissions. Okay. Just by the way, I realize I'm saying a lot of things here that aren't reflected on the slides. When I send the slides out, this information is all in the notes section of the PowerPoint. So you do have access to this extra context that I'm talking about that you can't quite see on the slide, because the slide is just the feedback, it's not the feedback form, the application form. Okay. Okay, and I also see in the chat someone's asked about the links for the application form. I'll send those on an email after today's session. Also on the slides earlier, there was a mention of the web address. That's a clickable link. So if you just click on that, that'll take you there as well. Okay, so moving on. So that's the your project details section completed. So there's lots of information there. The key bits, I think, are about your activities and what was the other section? And demonstrating that you're a change-making or amplifying organization, and thinking about, you know, who you're working with. Okay, so there are scoring questions in that section, but the following section is also incredibly important. This is about your outcomes, and it asks what improvements do you expect to see for your beneficiaries as a result of your change-making or amplifying projects. When thinking about your outcomes, okay, it's easy to think about, you know, oh, our outcome is delivering the service. You know, that's what we think. You know, that's actually your activities. That's covered by the Your Project section. Your outcomes is about the types of change that you expect to see for your beneficiaries. Will you be changing how people think? You know, their attitudes, their knowledge, their beliefs? Will it be about what they do in terms of their behaviors? Okay. Will it be about what people have? Are you helping people get qualifications, helping people with their mental health and well-being, or with their relationships, or whatever it may be? So think about those intrinsic changes that people go through. Maybe it's about inspiring a younger group of people to become more confident, okay, through, I don't know, performing arts. And if you can have just a few outcomes that reflect those kind of changes, then you're well on your way to answering this question well. When you're discussing outcomes, it helps to use that language of change, talk about preventing, improving, reducing, or increasing. Okay, so it might be increased confidence among young people when you know, performing theatre or something like that. Okay, so that question there is, please tell us about the impact you think your activity will have and how this supports the council's wider strategic objectives. Okay, so the strategic objectives being that change-making or amplifying function of this grant. And it says, please tell us how your activity will make change or amplify equality, inclusion, and representation within your organization, and /or the work you deliver, and /or the culture sector in Southwark, detailing your aims and desired objectives and how they'll be achieved. It then asks, how will you measure the success of your activity and evaluate its outcomes? So do you have a monitoring and evaluation process in place? A great way of going about that is to do a survey beforehand and a survey afterwards. That's quite a simple way of doing it. So you can ask questions about how confident do you feel at doing X, Y, Z, you know, other questions as well. Make sure they relate to your outcomes. If you can do that survey before the project begins, then you have a sort of benchmark there. And then if you do it afterwards, you can see improvements from your project starting to your project ending. Okay, so you can see increased levels of confidence, increased levels of understanding, whatever it may be. That's quite a simple approach. You may choose to take a different approach. Maybe you're just building a bank of case studies where people share their experiences in a more subjective way. That's absolutely fine as well. The member of the council I spoke with, he said you can take that quantitative approach, which is typically about surveys and things like that, or you can take that qualitative approach where people talk about their lived experience. Either is fine, but just make sure to share with a bit of detail how you'll go about measuring the success of your project. How will you show that your outcomes have been achieved? C2 asks about Southwark 2030. Okay, so it says, how does your activity support the council's ambitions for Southwark 2030? You can see there's a little question mark. If you click on that, that gives you more detail about what Southwark 2030 is. but I can also go through it now. It's the council's overarching strategy for housing, early years support, the environment, crime reduction, the local economy, and health. If you can demonstrate how your work ties into one or more of those areas, then that's great. You can show that it supports Southwark 2030. One example of that might be that working with young people, again, to use like a theatre example, you work with young people in a series of theatre workshops, that keeps them out of trouble. It gives them a place to go. It gives them a place of community. It might keep them from falling in with a bad crowd and therefore preventing criminality. Okay, so that ties into one of the pillars of Southwark 2030, but it also helps them develop skills that could help them in turn find employment. So it can also help with the local economy as well. So you can see on two levels that your work may support Southwark 2030. Okay. If you can demonstrate that your work supports the council's strategy, it will boost your application's chance of success. C3 asks, which of the following themes does your activity support? And it has three options to select from. One is the creative economy, one is creative growth, and another is creative people. Okay, so creative economy says providing the right environment for skills development and access to opportunities for sustainable employment within the sector. Creative growth is about meeting the cultural needs of existing and new communities by retaining and developing viable cultural organizations, venues, and work spaces. Creative people is about ensuring that everyone has access to the high quality cultural offer on their doorstep, regardless of knowledge, skills, needs, or experience. Okay, so just select one of those three, whatever aligns most with your general, with your project aims. Okay, so that's the main bulk of the application in terms of the written responses. There was quite a lot of detail there, so I apologize if it sort of, oh, and I can see that we're coming up to 11. Sorry, I'm overrunning slightly, so I'll try and run through the last bit fairly quickly. The next part is about expenditure. So you fill this in like an Excel spreadsheet. It actually has rows, and you can add in rows, and each line relates to one area of expenditure. You don't need to have loads and loads of detail. If it's office supplies, you don't need to break out each type of stationery, for example. But remember, only include expenditure for this specific grant, and don't put it off to the end as well. That's one pitfall for funding applications generally, that you've rushed through your budget because you focused more on the other elements of the application. It also asks, what is your total project cost? So that's for when you might only be applying for part of the funding for your project and you're getting funding elsewhere. And then it asks, you know, for a bit of information about where else you're getting funding from. But the expenditure, the line by line expenditure is just for the just how you'll spend the money that you would be receiving from the Culture Together grant. The other information section, so this is the E1, E2, E3. This is where you upload your recent bank statement, your governance document, which requires a Southwark postcode, and a safeguarding policy if relevant, and that's if you work with young people or vulnerable individuals. It also asks for other information, additional information about your application or activity, and that could be a recent testimonial. Maybe you could link to an Instagram page where someone's saying how great your work is or something like that. And then it's got your equalities monitoring. I'm sure you've done this before. That's asking about, you know, the demographic breakdown of yourself, your organization. That is not taken into account for scoring applications. That they just do that as a matter of course. Okay, and another reminder that the deadline is Sunday, 23rd of November, just before midnight. Okay, so does anyone have any questions? I hope that made sense. I'm sorry it was a little bit rushed at the end there. But if you have any questions, please do go ahead and put your hand up or post it in the chat. Any questions? I'm just going to put a feedback form for today's session as well. If you could kindly fill that out. There we go. So Marcia, you have your hand up.
I'm just becoming familiar with this grant, so thank you very much, Jeremy. It's quite a lot of information that's very useful. I was just wondering, do you have, because the arts sector, you know what Ireland has done in terms of supporting artists. So do you have support for the organizations for capacity building so they can register and be in a position of filling the form, because quite a lot of people don't fill up the form because it seems quite complex to them. Do you have a way in which you can, throughout the time of, before the application, I know short notice for this year, but for future reference, be able to actually sit together and be able to actually learn how to do the process without fear?
Yep, so I would recommend booking an organizational support appointment with Community Southwark, and I'm going to share the link for that now. One of our BCS support officers, we've got 3 of them, can give you a hand. They can offer a bit of feedback. You know, even if it's not specific to Culture Together, they can talk about what you might need in terms of governance, what you might need in terms of health and safety policies, safeguarding policies, whatever. So they're just good all-rounders. They can really help on any area, and they can support with this grant as well. So I'll just pop that in the chat now.
Thank you very much. There are many organizations that are doing great work operating without any formality, but they actually can benefit from being able to be supported. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Marcia. Daryl asked, do you expect this to run this grant next year? There is a lot pulled together in a short time, so it'd be helpful to know. I can't answer that. So the Community Southwark, we're not the council. We're doing this on behalf of our members to encourage members to apply for more grants, because obviously more money into the sector is a good thing. I don't administer the grant myself. I can't say whether they'd do it. I'd be a little surprised if they got rid of it, because they did it last year and I think they did it the year before that. And this Southwark Stands Together initiative, of which it's a part, I think it's there for the long haul. So I think there'll be a version of this grant next year. Typically, the council don't just get rid of grants altogether. What's more likely to happen is if they've got budget reductions, you might just have a smaller pot, which is a shame. But the grant, I'd be surprised if it doesn't run next year. In the meantime, I would look at other grants that are available. We have a funding e-bulletin at Southwark. I can share that now. And let me just do it. Sorry, I'm just getting the page up. The Southwark e-bulletin has all sorts of funding opportunities as well. And maybe there's another one that has a less tight deadline, which can maybe be equally suited to your needs. What other questions do we have here? Thank you very much for all this information. Are there going to be another grant? I don't quite, I think so the council run plenty of grants, often simultaneously. So it's worth actually going on that Benefactor Cloud website just to see what other grants are running. You might see something that's also suited to your organization, which would be good. But yeah, there are other grants running as well. Marcia, you have your hand up. Would you like to unmute and go ahead?
I was just asking the question about the longevity of the project. So if I apply for this year and the next 3 years, would that be as a response to this application form, or we need to apply every year?
Okay, so the project needs to fall within the 1st of April 2026 and the 31st of March 2027. I think they want to see that the project fits within that time. I don't think they want to sort of, I don't think they're sort of thinking, oh, this is the first year of the project and then it's going to run into years 2 and 3. But the thing with these funding applications is the word project can be slightly misleading. When people think of a project, they think of something very specific, you know, like a particular program that runs through summer, like an after-school club that runs through summer, and that's your project. When actually a project can be something like, I don't know, supporting, I don't know, like it can be about venue hire over a specific period of time, which feels less like a comprehensive project, but the hiring of the venue enables you to do all sorts of other things that support your day-to-day work. So you can slightly reframe what a project means. But what I wouldn't do is frame your project as being the first year of a long project, because then they'll say, well, you can't show that you're meeting your outcomes, can you, within a year, because it'll take 3 years to really achieve those outcomes. And they'll want to see that within that 1 year, from the 1st of April through 26th to the 31st of March, they want to see that you're sort of meeting your outcomes at least some of the way within that 1 year period. Does that make sense? Have I answered your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Zahari, you have your hand raised. Would you like to unmute and yeah.
Hi, Jeremy, and thank you for the session. I have just a question. It's regarding maybe the previous applications or projects in the past years. Do you know where we can find these projects? So just to have, what are you looking, to support? There is any website or any link where we can find the other projects that have been funded in the past?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there is. I definitely came across something. I'm going to make a note of that, and I'm going to dig out something. I feel like I saw something about previous projects, and I will send it on the email afterwards. I don't have the link right there, but I think there is some information around, and I'll have a look for you.
Jeremy, Zahari made a very, very strong point, because the majority of communities have never applied before if they see an example. So you can create a mock one. So that people, just like when you're giving examples about what does it mean to deliver the outcome, the whys, it's like when they see the example of the wording, they go like, oh, this is what it means. So for my community, it means that. So that's very strong point Zahari has made. Very useful. Thank you.
Exactly. And if you can see, I think every project should be authentic to itself, and you shouldn't necessarily try and mirror what's gone before. Having said that, you can also take inspiration from what's gone before, right? And if you can see that one project has worked wonders for a specific population group, but you'd like to do that now for the Latin American population in Southwark, you'd like to do that for, disabled people working in Southwark, then you can show that you're meeting a specific kind of need that previous project didn't meet because it was targeted elsewhere, and that's absolutely fine. But there's already that template for success that you're working from. And I think that can help both show the distinctiveness of your project because you're catering it to another audience, but also show that there is something there that works. It's a good model. Yeah, so I think that's a fair point. Thank you, Zahari. Yeah.
And then I have a second question. There is not really regarding the funding, but as I see that you are from Community Southwark, myself, as my representing my organization that is called UK Latin Community, we applied to be registered in Community Southwark, as we have been working since 2022 in Southwark in Pellier Hall, but my personal address is in Greenwich. So apparently there is a conflict with this. I just want to make sure that I receive the information, because it's years that we are providing services in Southwark.
Yeah.
But someone from Community Southwark told me this part, that as my address is in Greenwich, I don't know.
Yes, so I'm pretty sure our rules around membership is that you can be a member if there is a significant portion of your beneficiaries are in Southwark. So I think there's something that's gone a bit weird there. What's the name of your organization again?
UK Latin Community.
UK Latin Community. Let me follow that up with our membership officer.
To have, a separate meeting, or we can explain as well what we are doing, how many residents we are reaching, where we are working, and who are we working with. Sorry to get this opportunity to raise this.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I'm going to have to follow it up after the session, though. I can't. We have a membership officer. And something may have fell through the cracks there a little bit, so I'll follow up with her. But thank you for raising that, Sahari.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions before we wrap it up? Omalada asks, can these links be included in the email? Yes, they can. Yeah, I will send those links through. I'll try and get the email out today as well, because I appreciate time is tight on this grant. If there's no more questions, we'll call it a day, I think. But thank you very much for joining today. I hope it was helpful. It was a lot of information, and it was quite tight to keep it within the hour. So thank you for bearing with me. Don't hesitate to email culture@southwark.gov.uk if you do have any burning questions. I think it is worth it. They do offer one sort of actual meeting where they can go through things in detail, but they'll always get back to you on email as well. So don't hesitate to do that. It may save you time subsequently as you're actually writing up your application. So it could be a good move to do. Okay, and with that, I'll say goodbye. Thank you very much. Do fill out that feedback form. I'll also send it on the email. Okay. Have a lovely weekend, everyone, by the way.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.